Okay, hi. Here's another introduction to a book you might like to use for your comparative coursework. This one is called Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, and it's written by Anita Luce. It's, once again, a novella, so it's not super long. It's a comic text. It's written in a diary form, and it's got a naive first-person narrator who we are supposed to laugh at. It's a satire. It was inspired by the writer Anita Luce, who worked in Hollywood. And she was getting on a train to go from New York to Hollywood with lots of men. And she'd struggled onto the train with all her luggage, and they all just sat around. And then another young woman got onto the train who was blonde and pretty, and all these men fell over themselves to pick up her luggage. And that inspired her the title, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. So that's quite an interesting, it's not a madly feminist book in that it basically just attacks a certain kind of woman, but it's good for the 1920s. It was written in the 1920s, and so it would be nice to compare and contrast with something like The Great Gatsby, for example, to look at two different presentations of that period where a lot was changing in America, lots of money, lots of wealth, but also sort of moral change that a lot of people found a bit disturbing. Female emancipation as well, women having a lot more sexual freedom. So yeah, it's a light, fun text. It would also go nicely with Breakfast at Tiffany's by Truman Capote, which is set in the 50s, but is a similar kind of character. So she's a young woman who is, to put it politely, not better than she should be. It's not saying these women are prostitutes, but they are women who live by being pretty and young and going out with rich old men. So they buy them dinner, they buy them jewelry, and they may or may not sleep with them, but they will dance with them and they will be on their arms. Okay, so I think that's quite an interesting comparison as well. So I'll read you the beginning of that to give you an idea of this sort of how Anita Luce creates the voice of this character. Lorelei is her name. March the 16th. A gentleman friend and I were dining at the Ritz last evening, and he said that if I took a pencil and a paper and put down all of my thoughts, it would make a book. This almost made me smile, as what it would really make would be a whole row of encyclopediacs. I mean, I seem to be thinking practically all of the time. I mean, it is my favourite recreation, and sometimes I sit for hours and do not seem to do anything else but think. So this gentleman said a girl with brains ought to do something else with them besides think. And he said he ought to know brains when he sees them, because he is in the Senate and he spends quite a great deal of time in Washington, D.C. And when he comes into contact with brains, he always notices it. So it might have all blown over, but this morning he sent me a book. And so when my maid brought it to me, I said to her, "Well, Lulu, here is another book, and we have not read half the ones we have got yet." But when I opened it and saw that it was all a blank, I remembered what my gentleman acquaintance said. And so then I realized that it was a diary. So here I am writing a book instead of reading one. Okay, so you can tell the writer's being quite mean about Lorelei. Notice how she and her gentleman friend are eating at the Ritz. Okay, so very expensive. How she always calls these men her gentleman friends, and it turns out he's a senator. Yeah, so she's moving with these very powerful, very strong people. Clearly, she's not meant to be clever. So the fact that the senator goes, "Oh, I know who's got brains," is he being stupid? Is he obviously just flattering her? She makes grammatical errors. She doesn't have a very good prose style. She starts sentences, I mean, yes, all these sorts of colloquialisms. So those are lots of ways that the writer undermines her own narrator for comic effect. So you might like the sound of that one.